Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm standing in for my colleague, La'akea Lowe, so I don't have a presentation, and it's a bit of an impromptu discussion we'll be having. um, I guess you can say that I've had a pretty unconventional life and career path. I started out pretty much just traveling and working and spending a lot of time in nature in very remote locations. I lived in Colorado. I grew up in Colorado, so I spent my youth camping and hiking and fishing. And then I moved to the Middle East and I lived in the desert for 5 years. Then I moved back to Colorado and I lived at a very high altitude in the mountains, and I didn't have running water. I was chopping wood, skiing to get my mail. And I think the reason I tell you this is that I never really knew what I wanted to do with my life, but I had a very strong drive to do something that I thought was important. And I spent a lot of time with nature, and that always gave me a sense of peace, a sense of connectedness with the world around me without really understanding myself or understanding the world. So I think that's probably something, it's pretty hard sometimes to understand where you belong in this world. So I think that's a good thing. And just like the presenters before have talked about, just continue to ask yourself, what is it that drives me? What is it that I get really excited about? And what is it that really annoys me? Because those are clues. I moved to Maui to become a professional windsurfer, and that didn't work out. I ended up running out of money and breaking all of my gear, and I started working in the charter boat industry. And that's where I started to become, I was always a windsurfer, and I had always loved being on the ocean. But when I was working in the charter boat industry, that was the first time that I realized this relationship between people and nature is kind of broken. And there's a lot of different stakeholders involved, a lot of different interests, and a lot of power relations. So that's what started me off on my sustainability journey. I started studying at MCC, and I loved it. I came back to school later, and I feel like after all of my travels, I had known about colonialism. I learned about geographical boundaries that have been arbitrarily drawn on maps and different cultures. And I found that those things were really, really inspiring. And I also found that like Lance says, nature is a construct, and it's really important to be really cognizant of that. So when I finished studying at MCC, I was looking for opportunities to continue studying in the environmental field. And I kind of ran out of options because MCC doesn't have too many avenues for that. So I ended up looking for, based on different things that were going in my life, I decided to study at American Military University, and that's an online school. So all of my the cohort that I was studying with, they were stationed all over the world in the military, and I had access to amazing teachers who worked for the Environmental Protection Agency. I really lucked out with that school. Back then, it was kind of like not really known and not very respected to study online, but that led me to getting a scholarship to study for a research master, a 2-year research master in the Netherlands. So after about 12 years on Maui, I packed up my family and 3 Hawaiian cats, and I moved to the Netherlands to go to graduate school. And that's something else I would really, really recommend, is try to study and learn in different situations. It can be super challenging and really uncomfortable, but you will learn a lot about yourself and you'll learn a lot about the world. I studied there, I got a scholarship. And at the same time, I learned to speak Dutch, and I got to study with a lot of people from all over the world. And in that was one of the early sustainability degrees. So I got a very structured training on research, especially mixed methods research. And I think that's something that has served me well throughout my different positions, because everything if you want to plan strategically or you want to understand problems, research is pretty much the first step. So after while I was doing my master's, I was teaching. I was a student advisor, and I was working with students from all over the world, from Africa, Asia, and I really enjoyed that part. And I then submitted a proposal for a PhD, and I ended up getting a scholarship for getting my doctorate in climate change adaptation. So my work since then has really focused on the nexus between people and the environment, and a lot of the social justice issues that go along with that. So I've worked in Africa, Asia, Latin America on women's land rights. I've worked with, because women generally across the world do not have equal opportunity or access to education, to natural resources, yet they are oftentimes the person in the family that is responsible for collecting water, feeding children, food security, household food security, community food security. Women grow the majority of food across the world. So I'm very much passionate about women's rights, women's land rights. But I've also worked on a lot of issues on corporate land and natural resource grabbing. So I did a lot of work. I did the countrywide study in Cambodia on industrial sugar production and land grabbing there, which was pretty intense and heavy. I've worked in environmental, social, environmental, and cultural human rights. So I guess for me, I've always been really interested in the nexus between people and the environment, which actors can get what they need from the environment, which ones are marginalized. And I think it's really important what this world needs today. I think it's probably always needed it. Critical thinking is super key. We need critical thinkers. We need people who are willing to stand up for what they believe and willing to, just sort of maybe be uncomfortable at times. There's a lot of legacy issues in the environmental and the conservation field, and those systems are not always fully functional. So it's important that people are challenging current ways of thinking and doing. And I think it's important to just you don't need to have everything figured out. Life should be a journey, and it's important to be flexible and creative, and just listen to yourself and be willing to learn and switch gears if you have to. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks, everyone.